Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Eureka Solutions webinar today, which is going to be focusing on buying NetSuite for fast-growing businesses. My name is Jack Loudon, and I'm a solution consultant at Eureka. I've been here for 4 years now. So essentially, my role sits in between the sales team and the implementation team, so kind of bridging the gap in between those two departments. So I look through the technical requirements that NetSuite has, and should you wish to look at NetSuite from a kind of deeper perspective, I'd be looking at what your requirements are and how NetSuite can provide a solution for them. Now, some of you may have seen NetSuite before, some of you may be using NetSuite, or some might have never used or seen NetSuite at all. And that's where today is going to be focusing on, if you are using NetSuite, how can that be improved because you're a fast-growing business? But if you're not using NetSuite, how would NetSuite kind of benefit you? What are the kind of issues that we typically see for these fast-growing businesses? And the reason why we kind of focus on fast-growing businesses as a whole, rather than just an individual industry, is because NetSuite can essentially work across various different industries. And what we typically see with those fast-growing businesses, as we call them, is that they often have the same problems, which we'll be addressing today. First, I'm going to go through a quick slideshow. And then we'll get into the demonstration. So to begin with, I'll just introduce who we are as a NetSuite partner. We'll then talk about the software, some of the issues and the key benefits that we see NetSuite providing, and then a quick demonstration as well. Now, I'll be happy to provide some Q&A, which feel free to enter the questions in the Q&A panel, but I will be addressing all of these answers just at the end of the webinar. So feel free to just kind of pitch in if you do wish to ask any questions. So just to talk about us for a quick second, why you should be listening to us. We were founded in 1996 on 2 core principles, which are technical expertise and customer service. And these are drilled into us from the moment we set foot in the place. And we are a family-owned business, so that is still true to this day. It's the owner who has now kind of took a step back, but his daughter is now part of the leadership team running the company. Now, as a NetSuite partner, we also provide 2 other products, which are Sage 200 and iPlicit. So both of these are kind of smaller accounting services, Sage 200 being on-premise, iPlicit being a kind of finance cloud service, and NetSuite being that overarching kind of ERP, which you can really manage from any industry where you need stock, finance, or the full shebang. We also have our own developed product, which allows you to integrate all of these products with other third-party softwares, whether that be CRM, e-commerce, etc. And that is called Syncly. So we can do it all in-house. We've got our own implementation, development, and support team to manage that full project as well. Now, to go over what our NetSuite credentials are, we have been a provider for nearly 13 years now, coming up in October. And on the first year that we started becoming a NetSuite partner, we became a new partner of the year for the EMEA region. And that was built on the experience that we had implemented Sage 200, which we'd been doing for 10 years at that time. We also won 5-star partner award and the best performing partner in 2021. They no longer do the 5-star award anymore. That's now based on your credentials. So that expertise in ERP is what you then see there, which we get every year. And we have delivered over 120 NetSuite implementations from end to end. Although in terms of ad hoc projects that we've done for existing customers, for example, that would be well into the thousands right now. Now, just a quick part about NetSuite. Essentially, it was founded in '98. It was, well, I guess, the pioneer of cloud-based financial accounting systems, and it has been truly developed into a full ERP package. That was helped by the acquisition by Oracle in 2016. So the amount of investment and enhancement security that's been added in since then has obviously doubled, tripled, quartered, and the customer base has also increased as that as well. Now, as a true cloud product, which allows you to access the system from any device, anytime, anywhere, and all of your data will be within one database. So no matter where you are in the world, what department you're on, all of your data, if you're using NetSuite, will be kind of sharing that same database. So you're all looking at the same reports. All the data is coming from that same place. Now, with it being Oracle backed, it is built on the Oracle Cloud infrastructure, so it does have that intense security and privacy that is known with Oracle, and it also means that it's on an infrastructure which is fixes itself. Oracle pride themselves on having their AI databases where everything fixes itself before there's even any issues. One of the key benefits of NetSuite and being a cloud-based system is when you need to, when there are upgrades, that is included as part of the package. So every customer is going to be on the same version. That happens twice a year. And that means that you're always benefiting from the latest technology. Any new updates you will be given. If there's any legislative updates, that is also given throughout the year if it hits a certain date as well. So, for example, if you've been a business that long, you were introduced to making tax digital. If you were on an older system, such as we have Sage 200, all the customers had to then upgrade their Sage, which one would be expensive for the licensing. Two, might need to upgrade your server, and three, the amount of time that you have to spend from a resource and also services cost implementing that upgrade. That's no longer a thing that needs to be required anymore. And it is used by over 42,000 customers worldwide, which, it does show the scalability of the platform as well, which we'll be discussing momentarily. Now, just to understand how NetSuite works with that single database, essentially you've got multiple different modules. And NetSuite is a modular system, so you do not need to use all of these. You could only use one if you wish. So as a core system, NetSuite is a financial ERP. Now, if you do require CRM or an e-commerce platform, which NetSuite has out of the box, or it can be integrated with your Shopify, WooCommerce, Magento, etc. You've also got the ability to have project management, PSA, project accounting. It could also do your full end-to-end supply chain, including manufacturing, or if you wanted to do human resources, that is possible as well. Now, in addition to all of the modules that NetSuite provides, there's also various Suite app partners. So essentially that is a marketplace which is available to NetSuite users, and they can then add on additional products such as payroll, if you want to have OCR invoice scanning, and various other reporting and additional features as well. That is all available and can be available within NetSuite. So it looks like NetSuite, feels like NetSuite, but it's just not built by NetSuite. Now, the other side to NetSuite, with it all being in that one database, you will be able to have your subsidiaries across the UK, and that's all using the same database. Could be across the world using multiple languages, currencies, and tax compliance as well. So that is all built in. It all consolidates up the way to your parent company, and that will all be managed so that you can then drill down into each transactional level of detail as well. And all of that, as I mentioned, is from the single data source. That's just to give you the visualization of how that works. Now, some of the fast-growing NetSuite customers that we have includes Motor Fuel Group, which is probably definitely our largest customer. Essentially, they own most of the petrol stations throughout the UK. They recently acquired Morrison's petrol stations as well. So you've then got all of the 5 billion revenue company using NetSuite, or you can then go down to the bottom right with Amphista Therapeutics, who at the time of purchasing NetSuite were just getting their first sales invoice. So that's what we mean, where this is one platform that can scale completely from not very many transactions at all to MFG size level, and they're again looking to double their revenue in the future as well. So depends how you want to look at what benefits you're going to achieve. If we look at some of the customers that we've got here, Eden, for example, they're a hotel chain, and they are throughout Europe. They're moving into other continents as well. and they're able to add in all of these different subsidiaries within the NetSuite and just kind of add that as they grow. As well as that, you've also got Flight Club. They're very similar, but more kind of UK based, from the fact that they've got they've got places all throughout the UK, and they can have all of their location-based reporting, as well as having that at the group level, while also managing all of their kind of daily transactional payments as well. And then if we look at Cloud9, they're kind of more stock-based. If you probably have longer hair, you might know Cloud9 more than others. But essentially Cloud9 are, they have kind of hair straighteners, hair dryers, and they kind of bring in their purchasing from overseas, and also then sell on their e-commerce platform and also to other retailers. So all of that kind of stock movements are going through NetSuite and then going into out to customers as well with their invoicing. So that's all being managed from kind of end to end at that perspective. And just a kind of nice quote there from Connect, basically, that with our help, they managed to get the kind of NetSuite as a one-stop shop for all their financial information. Now, why NetSuite for fast-growing businesses? So the point of today's webinar, from the kind of first stage, and you'll see this hopefully when we go into the demonstration, is the enhanced reporting visibility. So having those dashboards with kind of real-time data, and it's all going to be personalized to what that user that is logged in is wanting to see. There are automated processes, so it's not like everybody's going off and doing their own thing. There'll be processes which are set up, which can be out of the box, or we can tailor these to what it is that you require. There's also the ability to have all of these reports consolidated across all of your units. So, for example, if you've got 4 different subsidiaries or 50 different subsidiaries, you can look at all of that from a consolidated level and then kind of split those out into each subsidiary, and then just kind of look into each individual transaction from there as well. It's very easy, and that's what I'll be showing today. And the difference being is that it's all in one data source, so you're not having to wait for people to collate different spreadsheets. That is all there, which of course gives you a lot more time to actually make the decisions based on data that you can trust. And that's something that Dotmatics could see. So instead of having to manage multiple different spreadsheets which had copious amount of data, that is all just a click of a button within NetSuite. The second part is the time saved by NetSuite. So as I mentioned, a lot of the kind of processes become automated. So if you think about your approval workflows, whether it be for purchases, expenses, etc., that's all done within the system. So no more paper-based, which I can't believe some businesses are still doing. No more kind of having to wait for email approval. It's all done within NetSuite. It will notify the approver, and then things can be actioned as well. Another thing is, obviously, if there are kind of set approval workflows, these can be set up so that it's going to the correct person. If they're going to be on holiday, we can then divert that to somebody else. There's also, for the reporting side, how much time are you actually spending kind of just building these reports instead of actually reading, analysing, and kind of feeding that information back to other members of the team. And then kind of focusing on the credit control there, essentially what we can then do is have automated emails that are going out from the system and say, okay, this invoice is due for payment today, so that needs to go to our customers. 7 days later, well, actually, we need, we're due a payment and you're late, and then you get nastier and meaner the more days that go on. And, you know, one of the key things that we see from adding net and NetSuite is month-end reduced. And that could be, you know, from 50% to 80%. It really depends on where you're coming from, but that is one of the key things that we see. As well as, obviously, when you've got credit control there, you're improving your accounts receivable collection rate by 30-50%. And if you've got that cash in the bank sooner, that obviously helps your cash flow. And then the last thing to kind of mention before we go on to the demonstration is the scalability of NetSuite. So because it's a modular system, what we kind of encourage is getting you started and running with as much as you need to begin with, and then you can then add on the bells and whistles later on. Now, the other thing that NetSuite promote, and it's a methodology that we use as well, is the suite success methodology. So this means that you're starting with NetSuite. A lot of the processes come out of the box based on kind of leading practices that have been built on from the over 42,000 NetSuite implementations that have been done. So this is essentially looking at, well, for all of our businesses in the distribution industry and manufacturing services, this is the process or the workflow that we typically see businesses using. And then that means that you can then be up and running much quicker from implementation. So no more 2-year, 1-year implementations. It is much quicker because we're essentially just customizing what's already built. And please don't think about the box as rigid. That's just so that it's a quicker implementation. We can then customize this to your heart's content. It also comes with out of the box users, permissions, reports, functionality, you name it. The other side is not only is it a quicker up and running, but it just means that you're then getting a much more kind of return on your investment, because throughout that time you're going to be kind of losing out on time, money while you're running that other system. So that then gets you up and running on the NetSuite platform much quicker. And then just the kind of stat on the right here from Connect, their turnover increased by 146% over the first 2 years that NetSuite was deployed. And they didn't actually need to increase their finance staff required. Actually, one of that finance team left, and they didn't even need to backfill that role either. So it's just kind of thinking in your head just now, if we did that just now, would that be possible with the system that you're currently running on? So what I'll do now is I'll jump into our demonstration, and I've got my demo account here. I'm just going to hide that panel. And I've got my demo account here. As you'll see, I'm currently on Google Chrome, and I can just log in here. Now you can get multi-factor authentication and single sign-on. I've not added it for the sheer purpose of time in this webinar. But hopefully what you can see is as soon as we log in, we've logged in as our CFO, and we've got our CFO's dashboard, which we have set up for today. Now, before I kind of go on to our demonstration, our dashboard here, I do want to point out all of the out-of-the-box roles that have came with this system. So I am on essentially the financials first, so I don't have anything wacky or ridiculous that isn't often required. This is just a financials account. But what you should hopefully see is the amount of stuff that is actually included in the core package. So all of my users that I've got here, these are all the different roles, and all of these come with out-of-the-box permissions, visibility, and functionality. So for example, the CFO is going to have a very different experience on NetSuite to the sales rep or manager. And we'll be interacting with a couple of these users today. Okay, so if we go to our search bar, this is essentially the way a search bar you would expect to work. But if I was to then add it in, say for example, compute, it's going to show up all of the different records within NetSuite with that in the name. Now, if it was an exhaustive list, I might want to say, okay, well, actually, I only want to see any contacts with that in the name. So I'm going to put that prefix in there, and that should then only come up contacts with computer and name. Moving down, we've then got our recent records, some shortcuts, and also our drop-down menu structure. Now, what NetSuite kind of prides itself in is allowing you to navigate through the system in as few clicks as possible. So whether it's your menu structure, your search bar, you can even send, for example, if somebody wanted to query an invoice with me, they could just send me the link to that invoice, or they could send me the invoice number and I'd be able to search it up in the search bar as well. So for some businesses that are kind of running on, your Sages, that is, kind of really big and so very quick and easy time saving. Coming down to our actual dashboard, we've then got our different portlets. Each portlet is this white box with various bits of information. Now, The whole point about the dashboard is to be as customizable in person as to the user as possible. So if I didn't like my reminders being there, I can drag and drop and add them in there. I prefer that to be the top left because that is essentially going to be tasks that are awaiting my approval or something for me to look at. So things that the CFO might need to do, expense reports to approve, purchase orders, any large invoices over 30 days. So, do we need that to be paid? The other side of that is it's very easy to set up. So we'll look at all the ones that we could get out of the box. And it's not only these that you can get out of the box, essentially using saved searches, which are searches into the system using filters and criteria. We can essentially bring anything onto our dashboard as a reminder. Now, obviously, it depends on what it is you're recording, and you need to be able to rely on the data. So that is essentially you put rubbish in, you get rubbish out type saying, but that is how this works. But it is very easy to do. If we just drag and drop and then save that, it's then going to add this into my reminders booklet there. Moving on to our KPIs, you can see we've got some very standard KPIs that come out of the box. Again, these can be set up to add in various other ones, and you can also choose what you want to have in your headline, what you want the range of the KPIs to be comparing, etc., etc. But you will see as well that these are all hyperlinked, so you can then drill down into where the data is coming from. And again, we can also pop these up open to see the different trend graphs which are there. Okay. Moving on to the right, we've then got our KPI meter. So that's just reflective of all the KPIs that we have in here. And it's just a visual meter to look at those KPIs as well. Moving down the screen, we've then got our navigation shortcut group and tiles. So again, just taking us to other key reports, adding on to the range of ways that we can navigate throughout the system. And on the right, we've also got another trend graph, which just looks at our income by period trend graph. Now, as well as this being kind of very handy to look at, we can also look at, do we want it to be quarterly? Or in fact, that's actually, I can't really see that too well. So what I would then do is just open that up into my full screen. And again, we can then look at different ways that we want to view this report. So do we want to look at this in a line chart? Do we want to then export this? Do we want to export it into Excel as an image? Again, these are all things that you can then say, okay, well, I can go into this next meeting with data that is up to date, I can trust, and I can get a pretty nice visual as well. Moving down, we've then got our financial scorecard. This is kind of embellishing a bit more on our KPIs, but again, just kind of going more in depth. So looking at your EBITDA, net income as a percentage of revenue, and again, all of these are drillable, and you're then going across various periods as well. We can then look at a few more different reports. So again, looking at our top 5 items by sales. So what are selling the best? What are we making the most money from? And what period do we want to look at it to? So if we want to see it for this year, we can do it, and that will quickly update on the screen as well. In addition to that, we can also look at our payable side. So what's our monthly payables trend? We can also look at stuff like, how many days does it take to pay our bills, and how can we improve that? And lastly, but not least, on our dashboard, we've also got a bank reconciliation summary. So NetSuite does provide a daily bank feed integration. So it's pulling in your bank statements, and then we can automate the bank reconciliation based on the transactions that are within NetSuite from there as well. Now, I've not really got a dummy demo bank account, but they have provided what some data would look like with all the different bank accounts that we've got. When was it last reconciled? What was the balance as of then? And how many items do we have to match as well? Okay. If we did want to, for example, personalize this a bit more, we can use our personalized dashboard feature and then look at some of the various other things that we can bring onto our dashboard. Now, one of the other key things, which is quite nice, I'm going to bring my subsidiary navigator onto the page. I'll just drop that down just now. And that's then going to look at the consolidation capabilities of NetSuite. And if you do have multiple subsidiaries, of course. So if I look at all of our data just now, this is from the perspective of the consolidated kind of parent company level. So we're actually viewing across everything just now. You will also see that the setup here is we've got our Syncly and Eureka Solutions subsidiary, and we've also got an X elimination subsidiary as well. Now, the purpose of this is for any intercompany transactions. So it will track all those intercompany transactions, and then at month end, it will automate the journal, which would then eliminate all of those inflated transactions so that you're not, well, it essentially just streamlines your month end and also reporting requirements. If I wanted to look at just an individual subsidiary, I don't think there's much going on in this single subsidiary. So if I then click on this here, it's then going to update everything on my screen so that it's only relevant to that subsidiary as well. The other thing is, if this was, for example, in the euro currency, so if it was an Irish or a Dutch sub, for example, all of my data would then convert automatically into euros. And NetSuite has a daily automated foreign exchange rate, and that is managed by HSBC or Xignite, and it will also hold your historical rates for your realized and unrealized gains and losses as well. Okay. If I don't want to see that anymore, I can just remove it, and it looks quite good as that. Now, moving into some of the reporting capabilities. I'm just going to look at our P&L. And for example, using our browser-based functionality, we can open this up in a new tab. So we can just look at our expenses for this period. That's going to take me to my P&L. Now, you'll see here that we've got a kind of fairly streamlined chart of accounts. And that is because NetSuite will kind of streamline where possible. However, that doesn't mean that you're then restricted. We'll then show you how you can then slice and dice your financial accounts without having to do multiple pivot tables of all of your different nominal codes. However, we were talking about our expenses, so I can see here that's my admin expenses, which are the highest for this month. So I can actually just open that up in a new tab, keep working on this as well, and then I can then see the detailed admin expenses transactions that we've got. So if I want to look at this invoice that we've got here, I can then drop down into the transactional level of detail from this report. So that's essentially four clicks down to get down to that transactional level of detail, and that's going through the reporting method. However, if I had, for example, just the invoice number of this transaction, or if I had the link, then I would be able to open this up. I'll just remove that. So I can then see the invoice, it's still open, so it's yet to be paid. And what I could then do is I could actually search this up in here, and it would then also take me to that page if I'd known it prior to this as well. I can also see what's been purchased, which we've got a server and a laptop, so that probably makes perfect sense. Okay, so if we go back to our reports, we can then say, okay, well, I'm going to put this back to the end of January, and you can choose various different periods that you can that you want to look at, or you can look at it from monthly in here. We are looking at it from the parent level, the consolidated, so you could actually go down into various other subsidiaries. And you'll notice that we've got Ireland and Netherlands. That didn't show up on the subsidiary navigator, which I showed earlier on, because these are inactive but still have transactions in the system, so I can still report on them. Now, how we would be able to slice and dice our financial data is using our classifications. So what I can then do is use classifications which are tagged on transactions, such as class, department, and location. And these allow me to then report in ways such as, class might be our revenue streams, department might be cost centers, locations might be the various branches, locations, offices, warehouses that you've got in your company. So if I click on class and click on refresh, that's instantly going to pull out our P&L, slice and dice it through our different revenue streams, and I can then see via the different nominal codes that I have here as well. What we've also got is the ability to have that hierarchical view, and I'll do that for a department. And that allows us to then have a parent-child relationship with each of classifications that we've got. So if I then want to look at my professional services, I can then look at professional services as a whole, but also look at, you know, the business analysis, consulting and development, and split them up so that I can really kind of get into the nitty-gritty there. And that will then kind of show you throughout the full report as well. Okay. And then again, subsidiaries, if you want to look at that from the subsidiary point of view. So I can then look at the two companies there. And one that looks quite nice as well, if we look at our accounting periods by hierarchy, we can look at our financial year, our quarters, but then also the periods individually as well. If I was to put this back a couple of months, we can then look at multiple financial years across all of those different times as well. Okay. Now, that's just kind of brief reporting capabilities that we can do. This is the kind of how the financial reports will look in NetSuite. And in addition to that, we can also, you know, drop these and kind of explode them out if we wish to. And we can also use filters if we want to focus on any specific classes, locations, customers, etc. And we can also export all of these reports into Excel, PDF, CSV, Word document. We can print them, we can email them, and we can also schedule these to be emailed as well. So this might not be something that you want to schedule with it being your P&L. But for example, your budget versus actual, you might want to schedule that report to be sent to budget leaders or heads of departments each month so that they're up to date on where they are with the budget. Okay. So that's kind of it for the reporting side from now on. What I'm going to then go and show is the P2P side of an employee, putting it in a purchase request, which can then be approved, and then we can then invoice this as well. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the employee center. Now this user role is a stripped back role. So that essentially only allows the users to submit expenses, purchase requests, and timesheets if you're using the project's functionality. Now, I did say it was very stripped back, and you will notice that that is the case here. However, I can look at my previous purchase orders and expenses I've entered, and also what status they're at. So the depending receipt, do I need approval, or have they been fully invoiced? What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a purchase request, which is essentially like a stage before the purchase order, but it still is kind of completed in the same way. It just requires that approval set up in place. Okay. So what I'm going to do is create my purchase request. Now, in this case, I already know the supplier, so I'm just going to use Computer Plus Distributors. And I want to receive this by probably the end of next week. Now, when that is entered, that is going to pull through all of the kind of information that we know about the supplier, so their billing, shipping terms, etc. I'm going to put in for the 30th. And because I'm logged in as Abby Kwan, it already knows Abby is part of our Eureka subsidiary, and she's based in London. So that is already populated, as is the department and class, so that these are automatically populated from the employee record within NetSuite. Now, we've got the option of, just entering in a purchase order from a nominal code. NetSuite's leading practice is to use items where possible. And although we're not going to be bringing this into stock, but for example, this is what's called a non-inventory item. So essentially, we're just using a very generic item code, which is much easier for non-financial users to enter in these purchase requests. However, on the item, we will have the computer or IT expenses nominal code attached to the item. So what I can then do is add in a description. So say, for example, a MacBook. And then that's then going to pull in that there as well. Now I'm going to buy one, and it's going to be agreed at a rate of 700. I'm not sure if that is going right for a MacBook these days, but here we go. And then you've got all of these additional columns which you can customize and add in or remove or hide, depending on what you want your users to see. You might not want them to be overwhelmed with the amount of information that is there, but separately you do want to track additional information for some requirements. So that can also be done as well. Now, I'm going to save this, and then that's going to go off for approval. Now, at this point, because NetSuite's set up out of the box as the leading practices, because this is based on the value approval, that's what, for example, if it's over £50, it's then going to go straight for to Abby Supervisor for approval before this purchase order, for example, is created. And this is just going to at its most simplest form. It can go to various different people for approval. It could be a hierarchy of value, or it could be dependent on the department or budget holder that's required for that. So because because of this flexibility, there are lots of kind of auditory and compliance in the back end of NetSuite to make sure that you are sticking up with that compliance as well. Okay, so as you can see here, it is now pending supervisor approval. And if we go down to our related records and look at our approvals, we can see that Carol Morgan is the approver for Abiquan. So thankfully, I can approve that via the financial controller. And at this point, Carol Morgan would have received an email notifying that she has she's got a purchase request to authorize. However, she's also got her reminders to say, okay, well, actually, we've got some purchase requests to approve. So at this point, I just need to check that it's actually there. Let me just check the purchase request to approve. So I can add that to the top. And that's as easy as that. And I can then go into my purchase request. So we can see here that we've got two from Abiquan, and we can see that we've got mine here. So I can then just click into this. So I could bulk approve if I wanted to, but for the purpose of the demonstration, just to show how that would look. It's generated the purchase order number, but however, that's not going to be created until we've got the status of approved. At this stage as well, what I can actually do is I can look at the purchase order and say, well, actually, that's not using the right item code for this purchase. So I could edit the purchase order and change this before it is then approved and sent off to the supplier. Apologies, because I'm using a demo account, it doesn't quite get the same speed as the production accounts. But we can then see from here, okay, we're happy with everything, so we can approve that. And what we can also set up is for purchase orders to be immediately printed, or we can have this emailed directly to the supplier, so that they know that they've got the purchase order and we've got that all tracked within the communications tab in our purchase order, which I'll show you in just a second. Or I can just show you while it's loading. Essentially, this would all be managed and held within here. So we can say that we want this to be emailed to that email address that was there, and we're happy that they will have received our purchase order. So if I go back onto that purchase order that we had, we should then be able to see the status of this. So we can see that it's approved by our supervisor and pending invoice. Now, what I can then do is go into my AP analyst role. So for my accounts payable, it's going to open that up. And once we've received that invoice, we can then choose to enter that in. Now, this is where there's a couple options. You could, if you do require goods received, that can easily be installed. I've just said because it's going to be financials only, I don't want my users having to receive it. That's just additional admin. However, some companies require that, and especially for stock-based companies, that would be a requirement as well. However, for the requirement that I've got today, that's not something I want to look at. So I'm just going to go straight to invoicing this here. Again, I could just add the invoice and essentially the supplier would have then sent me the invoice, and I'm just copying that in. However, because I've got the purchase order already created, that's going to pull through all of the details from the purchase order into the invoice, and it's just a point of me checking that that is all correct. The other options that you do have at this stage is to have OCR invoice capture. So essentially, once the supplier has emailed your invoice, that would then be picked up by the OCR capture machine, and that would pull into NetSuite and open up a split screen of the invoice on one side and then your NetSuite on the other side, and then it is much easier to look at the and compare the invoices, and it will also pull through from the invoice to the fields. So if I've got the invoice number, I would pull the invoice number on here. So I'm just going to put the number in. And from here, we can also see that it's already pulled through the details from the purchase order. Now, what NetSuite also has is three-way matching. It would be two-way in this case because we don't have a receipt. But what it can then do is make sure that it is actually looking at the invoice and matching that to the PO. Does that match? In this case, it's going to be no. It's going to be 1 pence more expensive. And it's then going to send it for approval. So if it did match in the way that this was set up, it would be fine. We don't need this to be approved. It can just go straight to payment. But because I've got a zero tolerance policy in this demo environment, it's then going to flag that and require it to be sent for approval. Now, because of this, it's then going to essentially lock that. I'm going to have to rely on Karen Morgan again to approve that before it can then be paid. It also means that, we can have a look at that. Are we happy to pay it, or do we then need to query this with our suppliers as well? You can also add tolerances of percentages or value, quantities or value as well. So it might be that you just want to say, okay, well, if it's out with a fiver, then just leave it. Okay. We've now got our pending approval, and as we said, it is up to Karen Morgan to approve that. So we will go into Financial Controller once again. And of course, this will be throughout various users, so it's not like you're going to have to go into different roles like I am. This is just for the purpose of the demo here. Okay, and again, we can show how easy it is to set it up. And I'm going to say, okay, well, there's the bills to approve actually, so I just need to refresh that. And then we can then see, okay, well, it's just one bill to approve. So because that wasn't, there weren't any, it just was running in the background because there was zero. Now, if I look at the bill exception, okay, and then if I look at this one here, that's our invoice. And I could approve all of these in bulk again, but we're just going to go into that specific invoice. And click approve. So at this stage, what we now need to do is pay for our MacBook that we've purchased. And in NetSuite, again, you can create those payment files based off of the open invoices that you've got. So once that has loaded the approval, we can then go in to do that. As with NetSuite being a kind of financial ERP as well, for every stage and transaction that you've got, you will be able to see the GL impact of every transaction. So if I click our GL impact, I'll then be able to see how does that impact our general ledger. So as you can see here, it's still hitting that computer expenses account, even though I use just a generic code for the item. Okay. The next thing for me to do is create that payment file, sorry. So no matter what bank you're using, whether it be a UK bank that accepts BACS or an American bank which is ACH or SEPA or etc., we can create these payment files within NetSuite. So I just simply need to choose the bank account which I wish to pay from, and then the AP account, which should then show my transactions or open invoices that are ready for payment as well. Okay, so if I then look at my trade creditors account, it will then load to show me all of the invoices which are ready for payment. And once this payment file has been created, it would then mark off all of those open invoices as paid. And yes, we can see our invoice there. So essentially, I could just mark all to be ready to be paid and then generate that payment file and then upload that into the bank. So essentially from here, that's the end of the demonstration. I'm just going to go back into our PowerPoint for now. So hopefully you've seen from the demonstration today that NetSuite kind of provides that unified ERP that you can manage your finance, inventory management, CRM, manufacturing services as much as you need to really. But what we would start off with is just make sure that you've got what you need from the get-go, and then kind of have that kind of stairway approach, where then building up and scaling with you as a business rather than having in too big a system at the beginning, which you don't really need and you're not paying for it as well. The benefits of this is, your reporting will be enhanced vastly, and you'll be able to kind of make decisions based off of data that you trust, and it's much easier to collate as well, especially when you've got multiple departments, locations, organizations, subsidiaries, etc. The amount of time reduced from Excel spreadsheets. Now, that's not to say that you won't ever need a spreadsheet again, but the reliance on them will be reduced heavily. And that is also one thing that we can hear time and time again, is the amount of time that people spend on Excel. But of course, what we would obviously do is just kind of build you up and work sides, have that long-term relationship as a NetSuite partner and yourselves, and make sure that you've got what you need when you need it. Thank you for your time this afternoon. Please let me know if you've got any questions, and if you are interested in seeing more, please reach out via the contact details below, and we can get some initial calls set up and a tailored demonstration available for you.